My mother was hospitalized with a psychotic break. Then she got out and fell and lost 14 teeth and went into a coma. And I think during that time, I felt really helpless and I fell apart for sure.
I'm Tina Lynch.
And I'm Jody Paul.
And this is Oh Health No.
Oh Health No. Welcome to Oh Health No. This week we have a really fun man with us, our first man, to discuss mental health, no less. This is kind of a informative and entertaining episode, even though I think they all are.
They all are, definitely. Well, we know good people and ones who have really good stories to tell.
We are lucky we know people who will discuss things like this, and more importantly, actually do the work to learn about it, like Kevin Maynard, and share what he's learned with others.
You're right. And let's be honest, Kevin also knows how to tell a story. I mean, Kevin's stories were just unbelievable. Like if you were to just meet him and talk to him and have a conversation, you would have no idea what he has endured and come through. He's pretty badass. And he was so vulnerable, don't you think?
I'm just laughing at I'm laughing at the fact that you called him badass. I love Kevin, but
he's not a badass. Listen, the things, I mean, he had to go live with another family at one point in high school. And, you know, getting phone calls from Vegas that his mom, let's be honest.
He had this crazy mix of good and bad.
Yes. And actually, after we talked to him, I realized I can really relate to that. Growing up in New Jersey, right outside of New York City, having that kind of access to culture, diversity, the energy of New York, everything New York is.
It's a lifesaver. We call this episode Health Crisis Adjacent. But as we've learned, no one is really health crisis adjacent. A health crisis always takes a toll of some sort on the people around you.
Yes, yes. And Kevin shares his story of growing up with parents who were suffering with deteriorating mental health challenges and how living in that environment has had an impact on his life.
He's done so much work on himself, which I really didn't know. We're friends, but I truly didn't know how much he had done. He literally has done a lot of work on himself. EMDR, tapping. There are people who are presented with challenges and don't always step up, but he's done the work. So I'm completely impressed by that.
We don't know when we meet someone or even when we're friends with someone, what they're going through and just what they've tried to do to feel better or to cope and thrive in their life. You know, people don't talk about it. And seriously brave to try many different things. When he mentioned somatic therapy, you know, I was jumping out of my chair because I didn't want to cut him off. And I was so excited that, number one, he knew what somatic therapy was and all the practices that I do with my clients, but that he had actually done it for a long time and the positive impact it had on his life. That was just so great to hear.
Agreed. He's not scared to try new things and learn new things. And I love that about him. I think his childhood prepared him for working in unscripted television for certain. He is a creative. He's a writer and an executive producer. He's worked on such notable Bravo franchises as $1 Million Listing, Real Housewives, and Married to Medicine. And quite recently, he consulted on a new documentary about designer Diane von Furstenberg for Hulu. So if you want to know the history of the wrap dress, he's definitely your guy.
Oh, the wrap dress. I was so excited when I bought my first wrap dress.
And apparently you're the girl.
And I am your girl.
And he speaks Bravo fluently, which, we know you love.
He had me at Bravo. You know how I love my Bravo.
I think what we have learned, even in the short time that we've had this podcast, is how many people watch Bravo and how many people watch true crime.
Yep, Bravo and true crime.
Rule the world, apparently.
Kevin was a joy to talk to and learn from. We know you'll agree.
Coping skills, people. And with that, please welcome Kevin Maynard. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Tina. Okay, I know Jody.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for coming on.
Or
We're so excited. So I've known Kevin for quite some time, obviously through television.
I think when I worked on Flipping Out, I was getting instant messages sent to the computer at Authentic from you because someone else had been sitting there. And that's how I met you.
You're right. Oh my gosh, I remember that now. That was really funny. It was like, who is
'cause
this?
for 2 minutes, I pretended to be that person. And then I was like, okay, I can't do this.
It's really not this person. It's me.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
I totally remember. Oh my gosh, that was so long ago.
That was a nice place because you could bring your dog and they always had food.
They had really good crafty.
What year was that?
2010 or 11.
Yeah, I mean, what show did you do there?
It was Flipping Out.
Did you do Flipping Out too?
Yeah.
Oh,
It was a super brief stint. It was the whole thing.
okay. Yeah, I enjoyed doing that show. That show was not stressful. That show was fun.
The show was super fun. It was definitely a schlep. I didn't love Burbank, that area.
Oh, because it's like
Burbank.
deep. Yeah. And then they said don't park in the neighborhood. And I was like, well, where do you want me to park? And I just remember we had that notice and there was a woman and I was petting her dog. And I was like, hey, I just want to let you know I work at Authentic and we got this note that says we can't park here, but I'm late today. And if I could just do it today. And she's like, oh, your car's so small. No one's going to care. And then she's like, you can always park right here because I'll put my car there and then you can move it. And I was like, she was so nice. So I had like a space. When you talk to somebody and you explain a situation that can be, a lot more pleasant.
So then when you hear the two dogs barking in the background, you guys will totally understand.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I have a dog around here somewhere. Jody knows him. He's the nicest.
Yeah, he's darling. And a cat.
And a cat. She's not going to like this.
Oh my God,
sweet.
she's so pretty. Hi.
I know.
Look at her face.
She's very malleable and she doesn't have a mean bone in her body, really.
No, she's very
Oh,
sweet.
that face.
I know. Winnie.
Hi, Winnie. Thanks for coming by, Winnie.
Like, I'm out of here.
Okay, the podcast is Oh Health No. And it's about people going through health crises.
Right.
But you are kind of health crisis adjacent because you yourself are not in a health crisis, but your mother has been for many years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Would you not say?
My father was too,
Yeah. So obviously it affects you in your life. And so we want to hear about when you figured out that she had mental health issues, how that impacted you, and then how you've had to deal with it. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Take us back to when you first realized that something wasn't quite right at home or with your mom.
Well, I mean, probably, I think as a little kid, my parents were both smart, like book smart people. They both had graduate degrees in education. They went to Temple University for undergrad and then graduate, and they worked in sort of academic fields. My mother, continued to be a teacher, was a public school teacher in New York and New Jersey. My father taught at the New School of Social Research and then taught at UCLA. And at some point, he also produced some independent films and some TV stuff. But they were very intelligent people, and they exposed us to the arts, and they would read to us at night. And I ate sushi when I was 9 years old, and I learned about, I learned about all these things that, in a good way, this was all good stuff, but there was also stuff that, I don't think my parents necessarily in some ways saw us as kids. So I think also my father, when I was really little, we always loved, Disney movies and things like that. But I would say by the time I was 9 or 10, he would screen old projector movies downstairs because he taught film at the New School for Social Research. So I saw Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein, and I saw Alice in Wonderland, but I had also seen Fellini's Satyricon, which has a ton of gay sex, and I had seen Triumph of the Will, which we all know is propaganda, Nazi propaganda. And, my dad used to take us to night court in Chinatown in the city and just wanted to expose us to what was going on. So I would be 10 years old and come home and tell my mother I saw a prostitute fighting on the curb, that it was her property, and got in a fight with a pimp. And my mother would be like, this is not appropriate. They're little kids. My father was sort of more like, this is the school of life. And So I think that was part of it. I also think I noticed when I used to do book reports or dioramas or things like that, that my father in particular would be very critical of these things as if I were an adult. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, The Squid and the Whale, the Noah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because the Jeff Daniels, right? Yeah. His character is super critical of his kids' work. Like he talks to them like they're adults. And so I would write a paper and my dad would be like, well, it's glib and it's facile, but what are you really trying to say? And then I'd have to argue on behalf of my paper. And I was like 11, you know what I mean? So I started to get a sense that
Yeah.
emotional intelligence wasn't, I mean, I don't know how, I wouldn't have articulated this at 11 in New Jersey, right? But I was starting to understand the difference between their intelligence, and I've never doubted their love for me and my brother. I have one older brother who's 2.5 years older, but there's a difference between sort of emotional intelligence and, book smart intelligence, cultural intelligence. And I saw the way they treated each other, and they weren't good to each other. They would make fun of each other all the time. And sometimes it was funny, and sometimes it just was mean. And you would get caught in the crosshairs. My brother used to run away from home all the time. He did it in Jersey all the time. I mean, he never got very far. And then I'd start crying. And then my mother would, say, like, wait, I packed you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Then he'd get mad and come back. But it happened a lot. It happened a lot. I think the three of them yelled a lot. I don't think they did. I mean, they just yelled. And that wasn't my natural inclination. I was an extroverted, loud kid, but I was a warm person and I was fairly sensitive and I didn't have that kind of anger. And they would communicate in such a way about things that were really minor things, but they would yell. And it'd be like somebody's upstairs and they want to talk to somebody downstairs and they can't hear each other. I'm sure you guys have, everyone's done this with your parents, with your partner,
Yes.
whatever. And then you end up yelling because you're mad that the other person hasn't come into the room, but you haven't come into the room either. And suddenly everyone's yelling and it wasn't really that big a deal, I think I also started to realize there's a big difference in the way you conduct yourself in terms of the music and the lyrics. If you say, I love you, it doesn't have the same calming effect of just saying, I love you. I just was around that. And I would feel like I was always kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. My father smashed a grandfather clock or ripped the handle off a door or, things like that. My parents were not physically abusive to me. I think when I was younger, they weren't physically abusive to each other. But the anger and the tension and the drama of it all was just too much. I remember my mother's mother was a really sweet woman and she was my person. She lived to be 93, which was great. We had a Thanksgiving at her house one time, just my parents, my brother, and my grandmother. And when my grandmother and I were preparing the food, and this is in Palm Springs, everything was really nice because we had moved to Los Angeles. But when my mother and my brother and my father got there, it was so tense and so loaded and there was fighting that I had like a visceral response. I sort of projectile vomited at the Thanksgiving table all over everybody and the food. And they were like, oh my God. They didn't get mad at me, thank God. But they were like, you need to lie down. What's going on? What did you eat? And I was like, it's not the food. It's this tension. I can't deal with it. And they're like, well, that's ridiculous. And then they sort of yelled at me. And I was just lying in bed and I didn't have a car to get anywhere. And I was just like, I need escape plans. I can't.
How old were you at this point when that happened?
So we left New Jersey when I was 11. And then I was probably 14 or 15. And then my father, they ended up getting separated. My father was having a lot of affairs with his secretary and stuff like that. And wasn't great. And he was also using drugs, I found out. And I mean, alcohol a little bit, but really drugs, like pretty hardcore drugs. And then it got worse when we moved to Los Angeles. As I got older, it did get physical to the point where like I was in college and they were separated and my mother wasn't doing well. She would take time off from work. She had tenure as a teacher, but she would just sleep. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't look after herself. She'd wake me up in the middle of the night and say, like, they're going to come take us. There's no money. You better get up. We have to go. And I was like, my dad needs to come home and deal with this, or somebody, like, we need a therapist. Because I couldn't go to bed without feeling like she's going to come downstairs. And sometimes I had a friend over and it was embarrassing. It was bad this whole time. I lived with a friend for my senior year of high school most of the year, and they didn't even notice because it wasn't safe. And my brother's reaction to all this stuff was to kind of just be like, it's none of our business. I don't want to talk to you about it. I'm just kind of pretending it doesn't happen. And I was like, well, if I can't talk to you about it, who can I talk to about it? And he was like,
that
well,
was
no,
his way of dealing.
well, right. And then he'd be like, well, it's no one's business. So if I told someone and then they got back to him, that was even worse than what had happened, which is ridiculous. My freshman year of college, things were really bad. I went to UC Santa Cruz and I had some time off. So I went and visited some friends in New York. And my brother called me and said, Dad tried to strangle mom with a phone cord and he's in jail. And I was like, okay, I mean, what are we so like? What do you do with that information? He's like, I don't think he was trying to kill her. He just was. I was like, I mean, I don't know what he was trying to do. He could have killed her. And I didn't recognize these people. It had just built and built and built. And I would try to say things like, this isn't healthy. This isn't normal. We need to do something about it. And I'm also a kid trying to navigate my own self-esteem and coming out and all the things. And so why are they going to listen to me? And also I didn't really know that my dad was an addict. I didn't know that my mom was bipolar. I didn't have the words, I didn't know. I mean, it makes sense now because he was so volatile, but you're in denial. You don't think your dad's doing crack and crystal meth and shit. I had no idea until he got arrested for it.
But when did do you think all of that precipitated her mental health crisis, or do you think she was always bipolar?
Always like that. So it's very interesting, on my father's side of the family, people were pretty normal. It was like Irish Catholics converting to Judaism. His mother was the one person who was a drama queen. She revered my dad. She ignored his younger brother, who is, by the way, a normal guy who's like a uniform wholesale guy. He didn't produce TV. He didn't write for magazines. She didn't really pay him any attention. And he got kind of lucky. He married a woman. They have 2 kids. They're still together. They're still alive. There's no dysfunction on that side of the family. They're upper middle class. But she revered my father, and my father couldn't stand her. Like, he needed to get away from her. And she was really crazy. And then on my mother's side of the family, there's a ton of mental illness. Not my grandmother, but all of my grandmother's siblings. So my grandmother just took care of my mother the way she took care of her siblings. And, the other thing is I found out much later that my grandmother had been valedictorian of her high school class, but nobody expected in the 30s that she could go to college. She went to secretarial school and she fell in love with her boss, and he was married and she was single. And it was a big scandal, and she got pregnant and he wouldn't marry her and he denied paternity. And my grandmother was not crazy, but she had postpartum, which is pretty normal, plus the rejection of this guy. And so for a year, his family sent her to a mental institution. And the first year of my mother's life, she didn't have her mother. Which she always held over my grandmother, which I thought was not fair. But so I think with the mental health on that side of the family, my mother's sort of turbulent birth, like I think my mother has been bipolar 1 most of her life.
Mm-hmm.
And just wasn't treated for it. And she didn't go to therapy when you were growing up or anything?
Well, they started to go to couples therapy. Yeah, they did. But she wasn't taking medications. I mean, this wasn't just, I'm depressed. It was like when she was depressed, she wouldn't eat for days and she would hold in her pee. And I was like, what do you do? And then when she was manic, after my dad tried to strangle her, I was horrified, obviously, wanted to reach out to my mother. My mother took my poor grandmother sort of hostage and went to Las Vegas and started staying in hotels and telling people who ran the hotels what had happened to her, and just ran wild. She was wearing wigs and we couldn't find her, and she wasn't showing up at work, and bills were piling up. And she was like, your father's going to kill me. He's going to come get me. And I was like, he can't. He's in jail right now. He's
Mhm.
going to have to be there for a little bit. And also, then he'll have a restraining order. You need to come home, though, and pay your bills and report to work.
All of this, how were you coping? Like, how were you getting through the day? Did you have somebody that you could confide in because you couldn't talk to your brother? Was there someone in your life that you felt safe enough to share all this with that could be there for you? Or were you just, doing what you had to do, like caretaking and just dealing?
No, I mean, by the time I got to high school, Santa Monica High School, I met people that I'm still friends with to this day. I met really smart, interesting kids, and I shared what I could share. And then when I was in college is when things really got bad. Luckily, I mean, it wasn't good before that, but I was away. I would hear about it and I
Mhm.
was concerned, but it just kind of kept getting worse, from college into my 20s. It kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But by the time it was really bad, I had a network of friends in high school. Like I said, I stayed with a friend. Then I was in college and I was coming out myself. And I did have a decent support system, and I had been going to a therapist myself, but it didn't change the fact that there were so many curveballs and surprises and bail bonds agents calling me in the middle of the night, women that my father had slept with calling me in the middle of the night, drug dealers calling me. People, I was like, who are you? What is it? Your dad owes me this. Sometimes people would call about my mother because we weren't there and because she refused any full-time care, which I think is sometimes part of the illness. Like, I don't want to hear that you're ill. You especially don't want to hear that you're manic, depressive. Depressed, we're a little more persuadable to talk out of something. But my mother's flights of mania, she thought she was creative and fantastic and brilliant. And it was during one of those, she went to a wedding of all things in Panama with like old family friends. And my brother and I got calls from the Panamanian consulate. I'm not kidding. And they were like, your mother's not well enough to fly on her own. Someone has to cut. And I was like, we can't come to Panama. Like they finally let her fly, but shit like that would happen. Like both of my parents would accumulate like a rogues gallery of randoms from government consulates to hookers because they were living these full tilt lives. And
Mhm.
that, even with the friends, even with therapy, even with support, it was really hard to keep it together and to not just consistently be a little terrified about what was going to happen. And then trying to, like, we'd always try to pick up the pieces. Like, oh, my dad's out of jail. I'm going to meet him somewhere. And then we're going to do something to take care. And then he doesn't show up. Or my mother, I think Jody knows this. And I talked about this before, but I think the worst experience I had with my mother was she was having a manic episode and we had to wait at the ER. And what sucks about that is, there's people bleeding from the head who need help. They're not going to take the mentally ill person and put them back in triage. And my mother became very disruptive and she ran out into traffic and told the police that I was trying to kill her. And then she fell in a bush and I was across the street and she was like, did you see that? He pushed me. And then they realized he doesn't have telekinesis. There's something wrong with this woman. So by the time that happened, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around a bit. By the time that happened, I had Travis. We had been together,
Yeah.
but nothing could kind of prepare me for these incidences. And because they're adults and not under the age of 18, there's really very little you can do unless they're going to willfully submit. And neither of them would. We did in LA, we would do, what do they call it? 5150s sometimes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. And either way, they did so much out of us. I would lie and I would say my mother is at risk to her life. And they would come to the door and sometimes they would take her. Sometimes she convinced them otherwise because it's a tricky illness. But there were other times where I was like, I'm not really lying. Okay, she may not be suicidal, but she just got in a car accident. She twisted her ankle. She's overspent on her credit cards. If she keeps this up, she will die.
Right.
So it's like, I don't care if I'm telling a little white lie to get my mother to get the help that she needs, but then you can only keep them 2 days. Hospitals, halfway houses. My brother and I we would kind of help each other, but we find out they left on their own free will. They're gone. And then we wouldn't know where they were, and then we'd start all over again.
And then meanwhile, you're trying to hold down a job
Right.
and then have a relationship yourself and a stable life
Right.
when all this stuff is going on.
I mean, there were plenty of times where I had my own ways of acting out where I just, I would pretty much keep it together, but I would cry a lot, and sometimes I wouldn't want to get out of bed. And, this was back when we had answering machines. I didn't really have caller ID, and I'd get these crazy messages from them, and I would hide and listen to them. And sometimes they were like hysterically funny unintentionally, but most of the time they were just sad. And there was a time once where my dad, before I was with Travis, was homeless because he had burned all his money on drugs. And he just came to my apartment and was screaming. And last time I had let him stay, I had a cat that was really old and she never would have left the apartment, but he left my front screen door wide open. It wasn't even just unlocked. And I was like, I can't have him in my apartment. He won't get help. So I hid. I you know, crouched below the couch. And my neighbor called me and was like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to call the police? And I was like, no, he'll probably go away. I'm just so embarrassed. She's like, don't be embarrassed. I just want to help you. I'm like, I know, but he's screaming for me and everyone can hear and I don't know what to do. And she's like, if you want me to go out there and tell him that you're not here and he needs to go, I can do that. And I was like, all right. So she did that. And she was like, you got to stop yelling. People are trying to sleep. He's not home. You have to go. And he did. But, stuff like that. It was mortifying. And I think on another level, too, on a subconscious level, I was like, what are my odds for survival?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. Number one, were you ever nervous? Could this happen to me?
Yeah.
Could I have, bipolar, or can something like this, is it genetic? And then the other thing is, because, there's, so many layers of trauma here. How did this impact your mental health?
Well, a long time ago, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety, just this kind of just racing thoughts of like, what if this happens, what if that happens, and have learned tools to deal with it. I take Cymbalta for anxiety, a high-ish dose. So that's helped. And my relationship has helped, as well as my friendships, and that sort of thing. And pets, too.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not really good in worst case scenarios. I think the pandemic, for a lot of people, I know people who were like sober who relapsed during the pandemic. So I kind of relapsed during the pandemic. It was just free floating terror. My mother got hospitalized for a psychotic break. She's still alive. My dad died of an overdose about 15 years ago.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I know. He was only 64. It was kind of, he had no reason to, but my mother was hospitalized with a psychotic break. Then she got out and fell and lost 14 teeth and went into a coma. And now she's not at the height of her she's not in a coma and she's stable and she's okay. But I think during that time, I felt really helpless. I couldn't go see her. And in a way, it was a good thing, but we couldn't really do anything. And I fell apart for sure. Yeah, it's not my finest hour. I just was sort of inconsolably scared between stuff and Trump and Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying on January 6th and COVID and all the things. I just felt like the world was coming to an end and people had lost all. Yeah, it wasn't, my husband was a much calmer, reasonable person during that time. And I couldn't see the forest from the trees a lot.
Well, I think everybody, even without having all the trauma you've been through, had an incredibly difficult time just because, you're isolated. Nobody knew what was going on, and the thing is that so much of our support systems, we couldn't see those people and everybody was just tapped out. So even if you had, certain friends, they're just trying to hold it together. So.
I agree. And work kind of saved me, but I'm not going to lie and say running Real Housewives of Orange County. It's always the healthiness.
Oh, come on. Pull anyone out of the depths of darkness.
It was a great team. I will say that I loved everybody and it was a big team and we were so busy and some of it was fun and funny. And it really did keep me going. I was very task oriented, but I don't think I did much else. I mean, it was basically really living to work and I was grateful to have Travis here for sure, but it wasn't, I kind of felt bad for everybody. It wasn't easy for us either. I think everybody, like if you lived alone, that in itself is really a hard thing. If you live with your partner and you're kind of stuck with them all the time, you're not communicating the way you would like. You're kind of depending on them for everything. I've never seen relationships that way. So yeah, I also during that time I gained a bunch of weight. I had 2 kidney stones. I had never had that. And then I got full-on diabetes. My A1C was 10.9, which is crazy. Once I found out, I lost weight really quickly, and now my A1C is normal. So they're like, oh,
Amazing.
you're okay. Thank you. And I didn't take the medications. I didn't trust them, but I don't know about you guys, but I had to take something to go to sleep every night. I don't take anything now. And I can only say that as of a couple of months ago, because I took Ativan or I took Klonopin. Now, for whatever reason, it's kind of lovely. I get tired, I go to bed.
And that's that.
And I don't judge anyone taking any. I mean, sometimes it's hard to go to sleep.
Yeah, and sometimes it saves your life, right? Especially through the pandemic. I have a history of panic attacks and PTSD, and I started waking up in the middle of the night with absolute terror, panic attacks, can't breathe. And, I live alone. So I hear what you're saying, and you're just like, okay, how do I help myself get through this? And for you, would you say that hearing that you had type 2 diabetes, do you think that was a turning point for you to focus on your health, or was there something else?
You know what it is I think that as you get older, right? Like, they say don't sit all day. They say stress can affect you physically. I think turning 50 and all of that, I think that's what happened. And I think, I've talked to Jody about this. I kind of need to give myself credit for turning my health around.
100%.
Like
it's huge. Just, yes.
Yeah. And I'm not eating a special weird diet. I'm not taking medication. I am taking this Chinese herb called berberine, which is it's a great thing. It really does control blood sugar, but it also just protects your organs. You enjoy your meals and you have an appetite, but it's keeping your blood sugar stable. So it's a very gentle thing. And I'm not like some wellness cuckoo. I got my COVID shots, I go to doctors, and I've also just learned a lot about how cortisol, it just is really bad for your body. It can disrupt your sleep, it can disrupt your thoughts, it can disrupt your digestion. And, I do meditation. I've done somatic therapy for a long time, even before this. Somatic therapy is amazing. I always had stomach issues. And I've never been afraid to talk about them, but I know people don't want to talk about poop.
Oh no, let's talk about poop. I love
you
talking.
You can talk about
poop. Jody will not talk. Kevin, Jody will not talk about poop with me. I am happy to talk about poop.
I literally grew up with the most. My family was like 3 women. You just don't talk about certain things.
Oh no, Kevin. If you're having an S-shaped poop, I want to hear all about it.
Well, it's Jewish mothers. It's a totally different thing. My grandmother, not the one that she did it too, but in a very sweet way. But the other grandmother on my father's side was literally obsessed with the potty training and would hover outside the bathroom. So you talk about, in my house, you talked about, that's one thing. You talked about everything, but I don't know if it was always maybe some boundaries. What if...
Yeah, same. My house, I don't know. I don't think anybody in my family had boundaries. I just yeah. And I also grew up in New Jersey, by the way.
Oh, whereabouts?
Lyndhurst.
Sure. What county is that?
Bergen.
Yeah, I'm Bergen, Teaneck.
Oh, Teaneck. Yeah, you're like 15 minutes from me.
Yeah.
Bergen County. So maybe it's in the water there. They're like, oh, we talk about everything. We have no boundaries. And poop is our favorite subject.
Well, I will tell you that, so what happened to me is I was like, oh my God, I'm nervous, I run to the bathroom. I'm stressed, I run to the bathroom. It's never been the other problem. It's never been like, I haven't gone to the bathroom in a week. And I'm glad. I don't want that. I talked recently to a friend who, she said to me like, Oh, I usually go once every week and a half. And my eyes kind of popped out of my head.
Oh,
I mean, well, here's the thing though. Everybody's different. I don't know if that's great, but
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say every week and a half is probably, yeah, there's something going on in the gut there.
You might want to have a little bit of fiber or vegetables in your diet.
Drink more water. That's my cure. That's your cure for everybody. I go, are you drinking enough water?
yeah, I know it sounds super uncomfortable, but in 2019, I was having some stomach issues and I found a therapist who did somatic therapy. And if anyone's ever interested, it's not an expensive thing. The only problem being is that, good therapists, somatic therapists are often not on insurance plans anyway. So you may spend $50 to see one. But I know that I went to see this woman named Dr. Andrea Bardock, and there's a protocol from England. It's an IBS protocol. And she would record it for you. Did I send that to you, Jody, ever, or did you not want it? A lot of friends.
She's never sent it to me.
Oh,
I
I have a lot of
about
friends who we would talk about the gut. And so we would do that, and then we would do individual ones every week. And she had an office in West Hollywood, and she would bring her dog. She had like a big husky, really cute. And I would bring Murphy, and I would just meditate with her. And I noticed I did it every day for a long time. And pre-pandemic, I was getting to a really good place. I was working on a show that Jody has worked on subsequent seasons, and the cast, they would have me go interview the cast. And I liked doing it to some extent because I know we got good stuff, but they would fight with me just because they didn't want to talk about things. And it would really affect my stomach. It would get really fight or flight. Bravo cast members they're volatile. And even though it wasn't really aimed at me, they were still screaming at me. And I think that was a big part of my stomach. I hate flying. I love travel, but I just get really nervous on planes. And I never was as a kid. It's like maybe the older you get facing your mortality, some people don't mind turbulence, and it drives me crazy. It just really scares me. So I started doing this program, and it's a Cedars-Sinai IBS protocol, and it really worked. They'll teach you how to basically use your vagus nerve, VAGUS, not Vegas.
Which would be kind of fun, though, if everybody had a vagus nerve.
Well, if you think about it that way,
hands.
if you think about it in that way, there's a way to kind of equivocate the two in a way. If you think about your vagus nerve as sort of like this is not the definition of a vagus nerve, but if it's the place where all the irrational stuff comes from, the crazy, Vegas is a very clean city, like you said, and it's Vegas as a city. My parents both have gone crazy there, spending money. So, if your vagus nerve is sort of your untamed part of you that your mind and your gut are connected, and your fear and your anxiety and your cortisone and all of that the vagus nerve is sort of thinking it's doing you a favor by getting you that worked up. And it is sort of, you could sort of relate it to Vegas, and it's resetting your vagus nerve so that you start telling your body like, no, I'm not going to run to the bathroom. I'm going to breathe. I'm okay. I have control over this. And your body starts doing the work. There's this one thing. I went to another therapist. She's amazing. She's based in Austin now. She used to be in LA. And her name is Diane Haskell Johnson. She went to the Rhode Island School of Design and was kind of going to look for a design career. And it was obviously a very competitive program. She had all these health issues. She couldn't sleep, lots of inflammation, all of these things. And she basically learned about the vagus nerve. She learned about somatic therapy. She learned about tapping, this. Right? She learned all this. Right, exactly. All this stuff. What's the other thing? Not just tapping.
EMDR.
EMDR, thank you. So all of that to sort of reset your body. And she sort of cured herself of a bunch of chronic things that were happening. She would cramp, she would get her period, she would get headaches, she would have diarrhea, she couldn't sleep, her skin would break out. And this is never to say that somatic therapy will cure cancer, but if your brain is, it does make sense that your brain is your part of your body. And if you can reset your brain and calm yourself, that you can get a lot of benefits from that, you know? And she's amazing. She had me do this thing. So I have meditations from her, but one thing she had me do when I was like, I'm out and about, I just had dinner, I'm walking down the street, I get a call from my mother, it's really bad. My fear, and look, I don't mind talking about this because I just don't think I'm the only person who feels this way. And I thought I could go to the bathroom right then and there, like in my pants. Like it doesn't happen, but I think it's going to happen, or it's this feeling, it's this fear, there's no net, there's no anything. So she, in addition to the somatic therapy, taught me this really crazy thing. It probably has a name, but one thing that you can do, and I don't think it has to be about your gut or having a leaky gut, but if just you're feeling tense in general, she had me do this thing, and I do it now subconsciously all the time because of the meditation. You just lock your hands together. And that, you know, and I paid like $300 fucking to have somebody.
as we do.
But yeah, but listen, no, she did a lot. And I do it unconsciously if I'm stressed about something, if there's turbulence on a plane, if my mother calls, I see myself do it. My husband sees me do it. If I'm watching a movie and something scary happens and I'm enjoying the movie, but I'm still scared, I do this. And it's like, I don't remember the verbiage, but it's kind of like you're locked in. You're like, nope, nothing. Okay, this is happening. Your boss is being awful. Someone's being an asshole. Somebody cut you off, you know, in traffic, and you're pulled over not driving because you can't do this. Okay, but you know, you're doing this, and it's basically like nothing can get inside. I'm locked in, basically. Your two halves are locked in and it's protecting you. And to the point where you do this sort of mental exercise where then I know it's a podcast, but you have your hands interlocked and then you can't try to pull them out and you feel the resistance. That's you saying, no, I'm okay. I can release my interlocking hands when I'm ready to. So, okay, you do this and you're pulling, right? And you're like, nope, that person's screaming at me. That person's freaking out. It's not affecting me. And then suddenly you're like, I acknowledge that I'm doing better. I can breathe. And so I can let go. And it can sound really abstract. Some people, I don't think anything works for everybody, but because I had a meditation where I was doing that, I do it all the time. I do it in my sleep. I do it at the movies. I do it on a plane. I do it in situations when I'm stressed out. I mean, is it perfect? No. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be reactive sometimes, but it's a small thing that really helps, you know, because we're reacting to everything else, external things that we can't control instead of living in our own body. I think
gets you back into your body.
Yeah. It grounds you a little bit.
And there's lots of tappings like that. I mean, they say things like hug yourself if you're feeling stressed out. Well, that's fucking stupid. But it's not. These things, they work.
It's true. Well, one of the things I wanted also to talk about is for you, because you are very empathetic and you're very kind and you listen to other people. And I don't know that had you not had the upbringing you had, that you would be that person. Do you think you would?
I mean,
I know it's hard to say, but
yeah, I mean, it's just how I was. I will say, I think sometimes that I learned more from seeing the bad example than having the right example. So, you know, I don't know. My parents always told me that like it was a bad thing. And it wasn't a euphemism for being gay or anything, but they would just be like, you're sensitive. And I was like, it was like, you're sensitive, but also you're good with other people. You make people feel comfortable. You make them feel at ease. I think for me, it's been like, well, what's the alternative? I don't want to feel that way. We all come up against people all the time who, for whatever reason, they don't really care about that. That's not, you know, whether they're mean and awful or not, that's not how they're thinking, right? So because of that, I mean, for somebody with generalized anxiety disorder, I do the best that I can. I've had to learn how to have boundaries, though, too. I think for a long time, I would take things on that I had no business taking on. I remember going to a therapist briefly. I never really dated people that were toxic or crazy. I went in the opposite direction, thank God, with people that are stable. Jody knows Travis. He's not crazy.
I was going to ask that, like, in relationships, if you gravitated more toward people that you had to swoop in and take care of, or did you go in the other direction?
For whatever reason, I went, but the long-term relationships I have were with very calm, kind, emotionally intelligent people. But I did briefly date. I tried stand-up comedy for like a minute, not in a real way, but I took like a groundlings class and I didn't have a headshot and I never wanted to be an actor. I just thought it would be good for my writing and I like making people laugh. And I grew up with somebody famous who did groundlings and she encouraged me to do it. So I did that a little bit and I met some guy who was doing stand-up comedy and he was very charming and he was funny, but he wasn't nice. He wasn't great. And then I found out he was using cocaine and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, that's really not in my, no, and he wasn't a nice person. And I've gone to therapy my whole life. And I remember saying something about him in my therapy session. And my therapist was like, well, he doesn't sound like the greatest guy. I was like, well, but it's hard to find someone you're attracted to when like we do have fun. And there are, I think the pros outweigh the cons. And besides, I can handle it, the other stuff. And then she just, of course, said that thing where she's just like, yeah, but why should you handle anything? Why? And I was like, well, because I can. And she's like, great, but why? She's like, your parents you have to handle. And even if you're detached from them, they're always going to be your parents. So it's hard to completely detach, even though I think you have good boundaries with them. But why would you have anyone else in your life that you have to handle?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I should
love that.
Yeah, no, but Travis and you balance each other out. It seems like very much.
He likes to say, as a he's half Filipino, half Japanese. He's from Hawaii, and they're very calm and sort of Catholic, but pretty much just like a liberal family, whatever. But he's like, oh, we just keep it all inside. I kind of, you'll know if something's going on, But we deal with it differently. But in terms of a balance, it's a nice balance. But yeah, there have been times where I've, I also let go of a friendship recently, Jody knows about, and it was another one of those, well, I can handle it. And I was like, I don't want to handle this. This isn't a good friendship. So I think my relapses or my moments where sometimes it might take me a little longer to shake somebody like that because I'm used to it.
So in terms of your mother, what are you doing?
I don't talk to her on the daily. She's in a convalescent home that's covered by insurance. She doesn't like it there. She likes to remind us she doesn't like it there. She can't walk. She kind of refuses to do it. So she can't live independently, nor does she have the means. If she could live a little more independently, we would like that for her. And we'd have to figure it out because we did used to pay out of pocket for her to live in facilities that were more independent once she wasn't living on her own. But she can't even do that. So she really wants me to visit more. I don't visit that often. I mean, I haven't seen her. God. So the other thing is like, I don't love that this is my approach. I just don't really know what else to do. And I know that I have to sort of fasten my own seatbelt or flotation device or before I can help somebody else. And when I see her, it really derails me. So I saw her on her birthday in August. I've talked to her since then, but it wasn't great. She didn't even seem that happy to see us. I mean, I brought the dog. She was happy to see the dog.
Everybody have a dog.
Yes.
But I don't love I have set up boundaries. I've done the best that I can. I can't really do anything for her. She can't leave the facility. But I don't see my mother or my brother, and they both live like 4 miles away. It doesn't make me happy when I think about that. I just know that, my brother is an adult. My brother is a rationally thinking person. Maybe my mother isn't, but he hates when I talk about this kind of stuff. He thinks it's nobody's business. And it's not even about him. We don't have a relationship. I don't have a relationship with my mom really, because I don't know how to. So,
well, yeah. And she's not, it sounds like also she's regressed a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not even the same mother that you knew her to be, even if it was an imperfect mother before.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, my mother, for years, I thought everyone's mother did what my mother did. Or I have to be honest and say, I don't think I thought everyone's mother did it, but I was used to it. I wanted to see what other parents were like. And when I was around other parents who got along well with their kids, I was like, fuck, this is really nice. Even though I knew plenty that were dysfunctional too. But my mother, part of being bipolar, if my mother would get really mad, she would talk in like this kind of exorcist voice if she was really upset. I
Yeah.
turn that voice on all the time. I'd be asleep. She'd turn on all the lights. I was 15. I'd be like, Mom, I'm trying to go to sleep. Turn off the lights. God damn you. I'll do what I want. It's my house. And scream, and then she wouldn't remember. And so, yeah, it's a complicated relationship. And, I would love it if she was happy. I would love it if she was more independent. I would love it even if at the hospital she could move around a little bit more. We could go do something. We can't. And I don't know if it's going to change at this point. This might be kind of just where it is. I've accepted it. I feel a ton of guilt that I don't spend a lot of time with her. I'm not going to lie. I'm not happy about this arrangement. There's not really much I can do.
No. I mean, nobody really can. I mean, that's just it. Like, who's equipped? What's the manual? Where does that exist?
I could visit all the time anyway, but there are some people that are really good at that. I know there are some people who, there's plenty of people who did not have an easy time with a parent and they're able to be there for them. I think for me, there were so many years of so much. I know she doesn't intend any of this, right? I do. I know that. But, it still happened. And my brother and I have no relationship. And I think my parents pitted us against each other. I don't think there was much of an opportunity for us to connect. I don't, again, blame them. I don't think they did this on purpose, but we're sort of casualties of this. And it just is. I don't know how to fix it. So it makes me unhappy sometimes. If I think about it, I'm like, well, that isn't what I want. But I also, I guess I do know that, but of course you don't want this, but it's the reality and it's okay. You can't change people. You can't fix people. Mental illness is, I think that's the shitty part too. Mental illness is just, the stigma is still so horrible. I think, some celebrities have been really honest about some of that stuff, and that's wonderful. I know Glenn Close has a whole website for people looking for mental health solutions because her sister is bipolar. I know Selena Gomez has been really open about stuff. People are more open, but I still think it's a real stigma among people, among just regular people. Like admitting that stuff makes some people, Jody knows this, I had a boss who was sort of like keeping track of my Facebook posts and being really condescending, insinuating that I couldn't do the job. And I was sort of like, wow, my work has never suffered as a result of shit going on in my life. It just hasn't. So don't pull that on me. I think people are, I just think the stigma endures. I mean, if you're Selena Gomez and people are like, oh, she's too crazy, I don't want to deal with her. Well, then fuck you, because she's Selena Gomez. She can do it once. I still think it's brave when anyone discloses stuff. But I think for regular people in working in any capacity, like making it public knowledge that you struggle with some mental health stuff is tough. I think it might be a little bit more acceptable if it's like celebrating your sobriety, right? Which is great. I don't think people are always that good about that. But it's still not like when people are like, it's my 5th year and I'm cancer free, and everyone's like, go you, to say, I've gotten a handle on my bipolar 1 and it just
right, exactly. Well, first I want to say how, I want to thank you for sharing this and being so open and vulnerable, because it's really brave. And I love that you just went there naturally, because I wanted to ask you how being vocal, being vulnerable, because it helps other people normalize it, right? But in the workspace, in your career, should I say this or should I edit myself? Or should I, again, like your brother took the road of so many secrets, I'm really interested to know how you navigate that.
I mean, I think it's a good question. I think part of me thinks you're only as sick as your secrets kind of thing, right? Like, and
Agreed.
Jennifer Lewis is really funny, the actress, and she has books all about this stuff because she's bipolar and she talks about it, right? But then I do also understand that it's good to have boundaries. It's good to be professional at work. Here's what I think. I think I agree with Jennifer Lewis, with all of it. I agree with that. But I also think basically don't put yourself in situations where being open is going to cost you, or it's going to let somebody take from you because you were so willing to give. So you have to kind of navigate that. And the work that all three of us do, where we work project by project. Or did you
I was an actress for many, many, many years, but actually now I'm a somatic trauma therapist.
Well, there you go.
And a breathwork teacher. But I was many years in the industry, like decades. So
Well, that's great.
And I used to have to completely, when I would have panic attacks or I would have anxiety, it was my big dark secret, because people would sometimes think there was either something wrong with me or I was taking something, because I would have, like, I probably just looked like, I don't know, sweating and running out of the room. So I completely understand that. I kept it a secret from a lot of people that I had panic attacks.
Yeah.
Which sounds, now when I look at it, I'm like, wow, I mean, okay, how many people have panic attacks? But back then, and being in the industry and being in front of a table of, people staring at you, I was jumping out of my skin.
Well, I think that's the thing too. I think, right, like, that's the thing about mental health and mental illness. Like, who hasn't had bouts of depression or mania or anxiety, or, it just is. I think we're all, people. I think when you realize some people, their lives have been so derailed by these things that it's really more than just a brief moment in time. It sort of takes over, because I do understand when people are like, oh, they over medicate. My mother, though, would not have lived this long. She's in her 80s now without medication, without things like Depakote. But, these aren't opioids. They're not addictive drugs. They're drugs that regulate her brain from these extremes that were eating her alive.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents somehow met each other. I don't know if they were always like this, but it was a perfect storm of, a stick of dynamite and a lighter, and a mat. And it, when I got older, in my early 20s, someone had me read that book, An Unquiet Mind, about being bipolar. What's that woman's name? Oh, shit. But you know the book?
You're not looking at
Kay Redfield Jameson, that's her name. And she taught at UCLA. Yeah, you don't even have to look at it. She taught at UCLA, and she was learning about bipolar when she realized she had it. Now she's still alive. She's at Georgetown, I think. Because I was interested in maybe a documentary about her, because I think she's kind of amazing. And the University of California system has an incredible track record with mental health, and their psychiatry department is kind of amazing. It saved my mother many times. So this woman who was a student of Kay Redfield Jameson, don't know if she's still alive. I think she may have gotten sick. She's at least retired. I know that. But I went and saw her because my parents saw her when I was a kid, and I made an appointment, and she was like, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm so pleased with the person you've become and all the things, because I saw your parents for years. And I can't remember why she was so open. And I mean, maybe I must have had to sign something, or she just did me a solid and was really confidentiality, because I know they can't have, but she was basically like, I was so concerned for their kids because your parents are brilliant people. They were not, there was a lot going on there. And I was wondering, kind of, don't take this the wrong way, but how you would survive, how you would make it. You guys really, I'm pretty impressed.
Kevin, did you, going back to careers and work, I know you mentioned that your dad was creative and he exposed you to a lot of culture and all of those things. Do you think that the career path you chose, that outlet, creativity, do you think your childhood informed that? Like that also saved you in a lot of ways?
I mean, yeah, I always really liked being around friends and was extroverted, but I was also the kind of person that could entertain myself. I remember I had a teacher in like first grade and I hated math. And I had to take these math tests. And my teacher, Mrs. Morton, I asked me what I didn't like about it. And I was like, well, you have to arrive at a right answer. And I'm always messing it up. And she's like, okay, but I think you can pass. I don't think math is your thing. English is. I think you can do it. And she's like, what would make you feel better? And then I was like, could I write a story about, and she's like, I love that idea. Why don't you do that? And that'll be part of your grade too. But finish the division and then you can write your story, whatever it was. And she really encouraged me from a young age to be my creative self and read lots of different books. Like I read all the Oz books and all the C.S. Lewis books. And, she was really good at nurturing curiosity and, all of that. So I think I had that anyway. But I do think that, yeah, I think because my parents were interested in interesting wonderful things, When I was in college, even when they were falling apart, they saw Angels in America too. We all thought it was this amazing play. I mean, their politics were always good, We were exposed to so much. I mean, when I was a kid and my parents had money before my dad was bankrupt, I went to London with my mom and we saw the play Les Liaisons Dangereux with Alan Rickman, and we saw Lettuce and Lovage with Maggie Smith. And they were so brilliant, these plays, and I was just so interested. And so they definitely inspired me to be interested in interesting cultural stuff. But there's also a part of me that, for whatever reason, can relate to Mrs. Kravitz on Bewitched. And infinitely interested in what my neighbors are doing or what other people are doing, and used to sit on a bench somewhere and write things down and listen to other people's conversations.
So great. So great.
So I think that's why unscripted and reality and documentary and all that is like, I'm really interested in people. And I'm definitely somebody who, working on a project, if someone's like, what are you interested in doing? I think I always start from the same place, which is the characters, the people that are inhabiting the sport. I'm not that person who's going to be great at doing your, show about roller coasters. But if the guy who invented the roller coaster was a total wackadoo, and
now that would be interesting.
Oh, right?
Yeah. I want to know. I don't know what he eats for breakfast.
Exactly. So I've always just been interested in storytelling and people and therapy and gossip and all of it. So, yeah. Also, just, again, learning. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody has a story to tell. Everybody wants to feel respected and acknowledged. I think it's just common sense.
Yeah, just being human, right? We all want to be seen and understood and heard. But also, other than your teacher, who would you say has been your hero, being your mom's caretaker and, and going through that experience, having that teacher, it sounds like she really cultivated this thing in you, right? That you remember her and she inspired you in that way and saw that strength in you. Were there any others?
My mom's mother, my grandmother, was the first person I came out to. She was somebody that, sometimes as a kid, I would just get really restless and I'd have some idea for a story and I would just write it all down. And if my grandmother was in the other room and she was reading a book or she was cooking something or she was clipping coupons, I could come to her and I'd just be like, Grandma, I have this thing to share with you, but if you need to do it later. And it was like the most important thing to her. And so I would sit down with her and then, I'd either give it for her to read or I'd read it to her or I'd express something. And she just was always so present and so interested. Tiny woman too, like not even 5 feet, and just interested in the world and politics and culture and cooking and life. She was definitely my person,
What was her first name?
Helen.
We have that in common.
And me too. All three of us.
Oh, really?
My person was my grandmother too.
Well, and she wasn't. People would always think she looks like a tea-sipping granny. She was a tea-sipping granny, but she also really liked beer. She also wasn't.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wasn't a prude. She wasn't a prude at all, especially once I was out. She always saw gay movies with explicit sex or not, because she wanted to talk to me about them. She
Oh my
called
gosh.
between Brokeback Mountain because she wanted to talk about it. She just was really interested in my life and really nurturing in a way that was really, really lovely.
Well, my grandmother stood in front of Andy Gibb when he was wearing spandex singing on the TV because she was horrified about what he was wearing.
Oh, really? No,
And I'm like, Grandma, get out of the way. My
grandmother, the one person that she found a little confusing was Prince. It just didn't. It was like, people like this? What's he doing? But for whatever reason, she would go to movies with me no matter what I wanted to see. So I saw Fatal Attraction with my grandma.
Yeah, that's amazing.
A lot of sex thrillers together. And she did like musicals. Her favorite movie is actually very cute. I think it was from 1940. It was a movie called Kitty Foyle with Ginger Rogers. That's sort of a forgotten movie, but it's a bit of a fairy tale. It's about a young working class girl who's in a secretarial pool in Philadelphia, and she ends up marrying the man of her dreams and starting her own business. And I think my grandmother always envisioned herself as Kitty Foyle because she was a single mother who had to take care of her family. She did eventually marry, and she married a really good man, but she overcame a lot. And she just, I don't know, she just was somebody that if she was around, we would spend time together and it would be like no time had passed.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that.
My grandmother lived to be 97.
Oh,
yeah, and her and my mom raised me, so we lived in her house, and she was my babci, my Polish grandmother, and she wasn't tiny, but she was incredible, just independent, took care of the whole, I mean, when you think of a matriarch, like that's who she was, but she was the most loving, nurturing, all the things, she was my person, so I understand that bond. At one point, she was taking my headshot to the hair salon because she wanted to show everyone. So she was like my biggest, supporter and all the things. It was very sweet.
yeah. I don't think anyone else like that. There have been people who, I remember I worked at the Strand bookstore in New York when I got out of college, and there was a gay, Black, older guy who worked in the fiction section, and I worked in the fiction section. And he just was somebody who was living his life. His name was Ben. And we could talk about all kinds of things because he was super intellectual. But we could also talk about just being a gay man in New York. And when I started to become a journalist and wasn't working at the bookstore anymore and starting to write and stuff, I would go see him and he would follow my career and I would just sit with him and we would just talk for hours and then we'd go to a cafe. He passed away, but that was somebody who early on I was like, this is a gay man who lived his life on his own terms, even when it really probably wasn't the safest thing to do. And, he survived a lot of people who died from HIV. And I remember he was pretty significant to me. At a certain point, you take from people these good things and then you just kind of go off on your way.
It seems like you have also found good people. It seems like you've actually had some good people just dealing with anxiety and whatnot. It sounds like you have not had negative experiences with.
I've worked with a lot of good mental health professionals.
Well, I think you're incredible. I feel really honored to meet you and hear your story.
Your story is phenomenal. It really is. I'm impressed by you. There's a lot I didn't know. I am honored too. Okay, so now we have 3 fun questions for you. Okay, first question. What's your favorite medical show?
Like just any show that...
Yeah, like a Grey's Anatomy or The Good Doctor or, that kind of thing.
I like all of those. I mean, to some extent, they kind of get played out. I remember I really liked ER because they did a really phenomenal job with Maura Tierney's mom's character, Sally Field, because she was bipolar. And I was like, oh, I know what this is like. Everyone's like, your mom's so great. And she's like, yeah, well, when she doesn't come home for 3 days, it's a little different. You know what I mean? I related to that. I think I like a lot of medical shows, at least for a little while, till they run themselves out, and then they can get really obvious. Like I remember on Grey's Anatomy, it'd be like, yes, he really does have a broken heart. They can be a little on the nose, but shows like that are interesting because people are interesting. The last really good medical show, I don't know if either of you saw This Is Going to Hurt. I really recommended it. Well, no, are you there, Jody? He's like, I'm going to watch it right now. Maybe it's our connection. We can't hear you or see your camera.
Yeah, I put I can't hear you.
Okay, stand by. By the way, edit this down to 15 minutes. I'm a talker. I don't care.
I love that you're a talker. This has been so amazing. No, it's not going to be 15 minutes. We
But
love
yeah.
it. It's the best.
Okay.
You were literally reading my mind, like things I was going to ask you. You just automatically flowed naturally right into it. So it was perfect.
Thank you. So how long have you been doing the work that you're doing?
The somatic work, only a few years. Before that, I went back to school to be a health coach after like a pretty significant health crisis. I had a pulmonary embolism.
Oh, wow. Shit.
Yeah. And then I had adenocarcinoma. I had cervical cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which was the kind of the beginning. So the PTSD was around those things that were happening, you know, the health crisis that I was having myself. And then I started having the panic and the anxiety and all of it. So that's also what was the start of me pivoting out of working as an actress. And I became obsessed and fascinated with all kinds of holistic, you know, functional medicine and health and meditation and practice, all those things. So I decided to go back to school and, you know, help other people. Once I came through into the other side of it, I just naturally didn't go back into acting and decided to start my own practice and work with other people that had all kinds of trauma.
That's amazing. I mean, especially because the first thing I did was you went because you wanted to help yourself, heal yourself.
Yep. All the things I did were just for me because I wanted to have my life back. I was desperate. And then things that worked and didn't work, I thought, wow, I'm inspired to help other people.
That's amazing.
I did talk therapy forever since I was in my early 20s, you know, for family things, you know, loss, trauma, all that good stuff. And so, yeah, I was in therapy, but it wasn't until I was referred to a somatic therapist and did somatic experiencing and EMDR and all those things that I turned a corner and was able to, you know, feel safe in my body again, that I wasn't going to, you know, die in the middle of the road by myself from another blood clot, you know, or like it was those things because, as you know, anxiety mimics so many things in our bodies, right?
Yeah. And I think it's also a problem within itself. It's serious because it's real. It's a struggle for sure sometimes. Meditation does help. I do talk therapy.
I still do talk therapy. I think talk therapy in combination with all these things, meditation and any other, you know, wellness practices. And, you know, I think they all go together.
It seems like a lot of people end up becoming therapists or whatever because they're trying to, you know, figure out their own stuff.
Mm-hmm. And now you're helping us with our podcast help other people. So this is just another, you know, platform that Jody and I were like, more people need to, you know, be able to tell their story in a safe place. And it's only going to help other people normalize it and feel like, oh, wow, okay. Or any, you know, there were so many incredible little things in there that you shared that someone could take away something we don't even know, right? Like, oh, wow, when Kevin said this, I'm going to try that, or that makes sense to me. We just don't know. So that was our whole, you know, purpose for starting this podcast.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I think that's great. I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Hi, Jody. Perfect timing.
Oh, there we are. All right.
I don't know what is going on. For some reason, my desktop just won't allow me in. So sorry. So now you get to see everything is going to be fine.
That's a good one. We were just talking about how she got into the work that she did, and it's pretty interesting. So, but This Is Going to Hurt is really good. And it's about a gay doctor. Do you know that British actor, Ben Whishaw?
Yeah.
Oh, good. He is the voice of Paddington. He's and those movies are great. But it's based on a writer who was a doctor for the NHS, and just about, you know, being a doctor in a public hospital is hard.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And Jody, the woman that you like, the Indian British actress who's in One Day, was the co-star of that show. So it's only 5 or 6 episodes and it's intense, but it's really good.
Oh, I'm going to watch that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You really get respect for healthcare workers, and you realize that healthcare workers need help. Healthcare workers need support, you know.
I have a friend who was an ER nurse in the emergency room at San Francisco General. There's so much trauma that happens to the people who actually work there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially over the last couple of years.
I don't know how they do it or did it during the pandemic. I don't even know how they're still able to work in hospitals after going through that.
Okay, so we still have to ask 2 more fun questions. Did you ever have the chicken pox? And if you did, how old were you? And what was that like?
Yeah, I got it from my brother when I think I was like, no, that's not true. I some kids had it at school. We were taking the train to see my grandmother in Philadelphia, the grandmother that I loved, and I was getting chicken pox on my way to my grandmother's. And my brother was being a real dick about it. And then I gave it to him, which was fantastic.
Take that, really.
Take that. Take some chicken pox.
Yeah, and I didn't have it like I had it, but like, you hear people had it in their throat and it wasn't all that. It just, it was itchy. I don't remember too much about it. It wasn't that bad. And I've had my shingles vaccine. So.
Okay.
I need to get that. I haven't gotten that vaccine. Did you get that?
You need to get the second dose. But they say one dose is like 80-90% effective, but I need to get the other one.
Jody, maybe we need to go get that.
Yeah, you don't want shingles. No,
I don't want shingles. I've never had that.
I know I knew a clairvoyant who had shingles and was immense pain.
Did she anticipate that she was going to get?
I'm going to get shingles next Tuesday.
I will say that's the one shot where I had, it wasn't that bad though, but I did have some side effects. I haven't for anything else, but for like an hour, I was really tired and my words got a little slurry. And then I was fine. And then I know a couple of other people who have been knocked. If you're going to get knocked out by one, it might be the shingles one. Like I wouldn't double up and get, like you with flu and COVID, you can get the shots. I have to be honest, I can't remember now the last time I got my COVID shot because I was doing it and then I had COVID and then I don't know. I should probably do that too. But if you're going to get 2 shots together, flu and COVID is a good idea. I think shingles, you should just get it on its own because it's
alone. Okay.
Impacts some power a little bit. Yeah, but I just was tired. It wasn't.
Is that one like a 2 shot or a 1 shot?
Shingles is a 2 shot, and I have to get the second one.
Yeah, they say you're supposed to get it in opposite arms. They found that when you get it in opposite arms, like the first one in one side and then the second one in another side, it actually helps your immunity better.
Well, it was something really funny happened when I got my last COVID shot with a flu shot. I had read something like that, and I asked the guy at the pharmacy, and he's like, "So do you want 2 sore arms or 1?" And I was like, 1. Okay, yeah, let's just do it all.
You're like, I don't care.
I don't know. You're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Did you guys have it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did. I just remember wearing Peanuts pajamas, green pajamas, staying home, bouncing on the bed. That's my memory of chickenpox. Is like it wasn't that bad. It was like, oh, I get to stay home. Oh, I get to have fun and whatever.
I had chickenpox really bad. I was the person with it in my throat and tongue and inside my mouth and the bottoms of my feet. So yeah,
oh my gosh, you can get it
really
bottom
bad.
of your feet. Oh my God.
We had to take cornstarch baths, right? Am I remembering that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
They were nice.
Yeah.
We just used, I thought it was calamine lotion, like that pink stuff.
That would make sense because it's for bites and stuff. But there was baths with like,
I don't remember.
Cornstarch or I know my grandmother always had these remedies that she would warm things up with cotton balls and dab it on our, I don't know.
Yeah, the baths and the cornstarch felt good. They felt.
It was soothing.
Yeah. So.
I don't remember getting those. Maybe I didn't have it bad enough or something. Okay, so what kind of sick person are you? Do you want to be taken care of or just left alone?
Oh, I'm terrible. I'm real dramatic. I get real, like, I come from people like my father's mother would always get sick and summon all the grandchildren as if it was on her deathbed and she was giving a speech. So I come from really dramatic people. And as much as I would like to think, oh, I soldier on, I'm awful. But the year before I had COVID, Travis was put to the test because I thought it was maybe COVID because I did lose my sense of smell for a couple of days. And I had it was 3 weeks, but we went to urgent care. It wasn't COVID. And I had this cough that like hurt your ribs bad. Like I think regardless of what it was, if it was RSV or flu, it was just severe because again, we had been inside for so long, or at least I had been, that I hadn't been exposed. So when I was exposed again, it was like, you know what I mean? It was just, and I was a total child. I just was like behaving like I was gonna die. And I was like, I lost my sense of smell. It's not coming back. And I would sit with these essential oils in front of me and just pray that it was
Is it back yet? Is it back yet?
kind of. And then when it's over, I'm like, oh wow, sorry. Yeah.
Was he a good caretaker nurse?
He's very
Bringing
good.
you bone broth and
Yeah, he's the best. And so I really exploited that. I abused that privilege. I can admit it. It was
So for anybody who asks, Travis, if you could just say,
yes, he's my husband. We've been together 15 years, but we couldn't get married, so we haven't been married that long. We've been married. Oh shit! I know when our wedding anniversary is, but I mean we've been married like 7 years or 8 years because you couldn't get married. Our two were domestic partners. We had health insurance, and then we got married when it became legal. So we've been together 15 years, and he's great. Yeah.
and Murphy is your dog, and Winnie is your cat.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. That was good. Sorry, sometimes I just talk and
No, oh my God.
it was so great.
You were so good. Seriously, you were amazing. And I knew you would be. I told you that already. There's a reason you do what you do, really, truly. You're a good storyteller. And then you're really good at sharing your emotions and being honest and telling what you're going through. And I think that that's what people also need to hear is, that go through things and they get through things and, they do the best they can.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there's a tendency, especially if we're isolated or separated from people, or when we're not in a therapy space. A lot of people, I think, people can be really hard on them. Well, some people are either they're hard on themselves or they're hard on other people or they're both, right? But I think we can all be really hard on ourselves about feeling a certain way and about just thinking that we're just the craziest and no one's going to understand what we've been through. And then, you do enough mental health work and you remember things like facts aren't feelings. And there's that acronym for fear, right? False evidence appearing real, which is a great one, or just, and you can know all of that and Jody knows me well enough that you can still get really upset and really angry and really fed up. It doesn't mean you're perfect, but I think the more we can talk about these things with people that are professionals like Tina or people that are laymen like me and Jody, it's less abstract, it's less scary. And, no one ever has anything all figured out. But if we're willing to embrace the parts of us that embarrass us or make us feel bad sometimes, then I think we're more likely to feel better quicker, certainly, because again, you're going to fly off the handle. I'm not always going to remember I need to meditate. But yeah, helping other people, having this kind of dialogue is super important. That's also, I think, what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And really nice to meet you, Tina. I'm proud of you. You've done some amazing, really amazing work.
Thank you.
And at some point, we'll meet in person. You're here in LA. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's on the west side.
I'm in Brentwood.
Oh, sure. And we're mid-city. We're like near Fairfax.
Great.
We're like a little triangle, the three of us. Right now.
Yes.
He's in Fairfax District. He can walk to the Grove.
Oh, I love the Grove.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh my God, Tina loves the Grove.
I know. I have to admit, I know. Listen, I can't help it.
I get it. It's fun. I don't think we'd go half as much if we couldn't walk there.
Yeah.
Jody
laughs at me. I'm like, let's meet at the Grove. She's like, you in the Grove.
The nicest thing for me about the Grove is that they had the decency to keep the farmers market going.
I love the farmers market there.
All right. I should probably go. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kevin.
So welcome, Kevin. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
I would love that.
Bye. I love him. He's the best.
I just realized we met at the Grove. How did I just realize that?
Got that. Maybe that's why you love the Grove so much.
Yes. How did that just come to me now?
It's so funny. I never actually made the connection, but maybe it's our love story.
We met at the Grove. Wait, is this where we put music in?
Well, it's kind of funny because I really do think that that's why you Love it so much. No.
And that's a wrap, people.
This episode was produced by Jody Paul and Tina Lynch, with emotional support provided by Ricky, Sabrina, Rocco, Oliver,
And Piper. Get yourselves a rescue animal, people. You won't be sorry.
You won't be sorry. Trust
Please
us.
do. Thank you for listening. We're so happy you're here and on this journey with us.
Yes, thank you for being here.
See you next time on Oh Health No. If you have a question or comment for us or for Kevin, please email us at contactus@ohhealthno.com, visit our website, ohhealthno.com, or DM us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube.
We'd love to hear from you. Please like, comment, follow, share, and subscribe. Meow bark.
Bark meow.
I love how you're like, no, we're barking first.
No, that was Piper saying that.
Sure it was.